Alright everyone, it's Tim here. Welcome to this short course where we'll be looking at making a really big epic sound for trailer music. We'll be focusing mainly on the orchestration techniques of the, orchestra, but also how sound design also plays a part in making the sound as big as it needs to be for trailer music. In this video, I'll just be going through my template quite quickly, show you what we'll be using to create this track, showcasing how to orchestrate the massive sounds in trailer music. One thing I haven't loaded into this template is woodwinds, but I will be aiming to use them at some point in the process. So for piano, which I use mainly for jotting down ideas and doubling bass lines, I use Alicia's Keys. It's got a very clean sound and it works really good for cinematic or trailer type projects. Then I've got the Lex Hall reverb, which I use on most of my sounds. Keep the mix low, otherwise the sound will get lost in the reverb. This goes for all reverbs, not just Lex Hall. And I'm using the Huge Hall preset for this template. I also have a Trans X Multi, which I might keep off for now. It's just a plugin that affects the transients of your sounds, gives the piano a bit more punch. And then there's Oxford Inflator, which is a limiter on the stereo out. So for impacts, I have a few custom hits, which were made by Matthew Hallowan. And then these two hits here. This one called Fast Hit is part of the Genadin trailer hits library, which is found in the Audio Imperia website. And I can't remember where I got the kick from, but any kick will do. So the kick is literally just to give a bit more punch in the low end of a hit. Then I have some more hit patches loaded into Vienna Ensemble Pro 5, which I use for pretty much all my MIDI instruments. I wouldn't say you need it, Vienna Ensemble Pro 5 that is, but it can help if your workstation decides to crash. I will be using this. It's got some, well, I might be using this actually. It's got some spicy hits. And then the more organic percussion, Plastic Ensemble from Damage. The cymbals are also from Damage. And the 8Dio Taiko Ensemble. I usually just use a Piatti a lot in my tracks, so we'll probably change it to that. I don't usually load anything for synths as it's mostly different all the time. I use a patch called Low Trailer Brass and another sub-synth bass, which I haven't got loaded in yet, but we'll do that eventually. And so then we come to the brass, where there will be a fair bit of layering. I'm not going to play through all of these. You'll hear how they sound in the coming videos, but yeah. So I use trailer brass, Cinematic Studio brass, Caspian, and also a little bit of Hollywood brass. I also have Century Brass by 8Dio, so we might look at that as well. Oh yeah, and OTT, which you may have seen on the stereo output as well. It's basically a multi-band compressor on steroids, and it sort of just gives a more aggressive, airy feeling to things. So it's best not to overdo it, because as the name suggests, it does push things a little bit over the top. And then we have our strings, which, unlike the brass, there's not much layering going on. In the long strings, I'm using Cinematic Studio strings. And I do have an extra layer of low end goodness for the basses and cello. So I'm using Symphobia 2, and I have two patches of it. So one for each microphone position, because I have the old version where you can't load both into one. Short strings, I make a use of fluid shorts and CSS. In violins 2, though, I've also got the 8Dio Ostinati strings laid, because both ostinato strings and fluid shorts only have a singular violin patch, so loading the same patch twice might cause some phasing problems. So mostly everything is prepared. I've got a generic EQ on all my instruments, which might be changing slightly throughout. But that's generally my template. It's super simple. It just has the main instruments I need loaded in, rather than endless stream of tracks that you see some people have. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, I just find it's nicer not having to sift through a huge list to find an instrument that I know I'm going to use. In the next video, we'll be looking at starting sketching basically using the piano and potentially a synth just to get a good feel for where we're going.